Manners and etiquettes, inshallah ta'ala. So that's what we'll be doing, dealing with the book Muslim Morals and Manners, beginning next Monday, inshallah. Well, the Sheikh might be. Yeah, we have to order it. We do have to order it. We have to order the book Muslim Morals and Manners. It's about $3.
No more ships.
It's about $3 from Dar es Salaam. And so if we were to collectively make an order, we probably could have it by next week. If we would kind of agree tonight or tomorrow after the Tarbiyah class, we could go ahead and get it ordered and probably have it in by Monday. So if you guys want to do that, by the end of class, we'll try to do that.
Is it by Sheikh Darsi?
No, this one is a compilation. It's a Dar es Salaam compilation. So it's not authored by anyone in particular, but it's a Dar es Salaam compilation. Muslim Morals and Manners by Dar es Salaam. Yeah. So we'll begin, inshallah ta'ala, tonight with the subject of Qadrullah, divine decree. So before looking at the book and commenting on some of the content of the book, we'll just deal with the topic in general, touch on some important points. And the first point is, what is al-Qadr? Ta'rif al-Qadr. What do we mean by al-Qadr? In English we say divine decree or predestination. And in Islam this refers to the predetermination of occurrences, or Allah's predetermination of occurrences, I should say. Allah's...
What page?
Well, the pages we're going to deal with are 66 through 72. But right now, we're not going to read from the book just yet, but that's the pages, 66 to 72, that deal with that topic. So it's Allah's predetermination of occurrences in accordance with His foreknowledge and as dictated by His wisdom. So Allah's predetermination of occurrences in accordance with His foreknowledge and as dictated by His wisdom. So basically, Allah has predetermined what will happen, and He's done that in accordance with His foreknowledge. He knows in advance. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And His wisdom dictates that it happens this way. Got it? Or do we need to repeat?
Repeat.
So Allah's predetermination of occurrences in accordance with His foreknowledge and as dictated by His wisdom. Just like that. So now, believing in Allah's decree in the correct manner necessitates that we believe in four matters. So we say, I believe in al-Qadr. That means that we have to believe in four things. And if we don't believe in these four things, then we don't believe in al-Qadr correctly. So the first thing is that we have to believe in Allah's foreknowledge of all things. We have to believe in Allah's foreknowledge of all things that occur and exist. So we have to believe that Allah knew what was before it was. So everything that happened in the past, Allah knew it. And He knew it before what? Before it even happened. Before it even happened, He knew what? He also knows what is happening at the present time and what will happen in the future. He even knows regarding that which has not occurred, things that did not happen. If they had happened, how would they have been? How would they have played out? That's the completeness of His knowledge. What was, what is, what will be, and what was not. But if it had been, how would it have been? And His knowledge, or this knowledge of Allah, is relative to His own actions and the actions of His creatures. And so there is nothing which escapes His knowledge. Nothing. There is nothing that happens or occurs that escapes His knowledge. He knows everything. So that's the first belief in the completeness or in Allah's foreknowledge. But the second belief is believing that Allah recorded all that He has decreed. He recorded it. He wrote it down. So we have to believe that not only did Allah know everything that would occur before it occurred or existed, but He also recorded it before it occurred and existed in the preserved tablet that is with Him. He recorded it. So Allah has knowledge and a written record of everything. Knowledge of it and what? A written record of it. And the proof for these two, the first two beliefs in al-Qadr, His knowledge and His recording, we can find it in Surah Al-Hajj, the 22nd Surah, verse 70, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. He says, 2270, He says, are you not aware that Allah knows all that exists in the heavens and on earth? That's what? His knowledge. إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ. Indeed, all of that is recorded in a book. That's what? The recording. Verily, that is indeed easy for Allah. We also have the statement of the Prophet collected by Muslim on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam, he said, كتب الله مقادير الخلائق قبل أن يخلق السماء والأرض ب50,000 سنة. He says, Allah recorded the destinies of creation 50,000 years before creating the heavens and the earth. So 50,000 years before He created the heavens and the earth, Allah did what? He wrote everything that would take place. So He recorded it. So that's two. Believing Allah's foreknowledge and believing in what? That He recorded everything. The third thing we have to believe in, ya Ikhwani, is believing that Allah has willed all things into existence. He has willed them. So in addition to knowing everything before it happens, recording everything before it happens, He has to do what? He has to allow it to happen. He has to will it into existence, right? And all things, whether related to His actions or the actions of His creatures, He has to allow it to occur, or it cannot occur. And regarding willing His own actions, Allah talks about willing His own actions. He says, for example, in Surah Al-Qasas, the 28th Surah, verse 68, 28-68, He says, رَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ. He says, your Lord creates whatever He wills and chooses. And He says in Surah Ibrahim, the 14th Surah, verse 27, He says, وَيَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ. And Allah does whatever He wills. Is that good for the sisters, or do I need to repeat? Good? But now then Allah talks about, He turns to what? The actions of what? His creatures. That they also are what? They're governed by His will. And they can't happen without His will. So He says, for example, in Surah At-Takwir, 81:29, He says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. You do not will, O people, O mankind, except by Allah's will. Except by Allah's will. And He says in Surah Al-An'am, the 6th Surah, verse 112, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا فَعَلُوهُ فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. If your Lord had so willed, they would not have done it. So leave them alone with their fabrications. Again, if your Lord had willed, they wouldn't have been able to what? To do this thing. He had to what? Allow it to happen. So His will governs and controls our actions. So we have to believe that all we do, everything we do, has been willed and permitted by Allah's universal will. And I want you to underline that in your mind, because we're going to need that later. That everything we do is willed, permitted, allowed by Allah's universal will. That governs all things that occur, and that nothing we do or that occurs in spite of Allah or independent of His will. We can never think that something happened and Allah didn't will that. It just happened what? In spite of His will. La. It happened and Allah did what? He allowed it. And had He not allowed it, it wouldn't have happened. Okay? So sometimes bad things happen and we think this is not Allah's will. This is not Allah's will. If we mean Allah's universal will, that He allowed it or permitted it, this is what? This is wrong. Because nothing happens, nothing, good or bad, except by Allah's will. But the fourth thing we have to believe in when it comes to al-qadr is believing that Allah, not only did He know, not only did He record, not only did He will all of the statements and actions of His creatures, but He also did what? He created them. He created these things or these actions and statements and brought them into existence with one word. Be. And what? And they happened. Be and they happened. And this is evidenced by the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Zumar, the 39th Surah, 39:62, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu khaliqu kulli shay. Allah is the creator of all things. He created everything. Everything that happens is what? From His creation. Everything that exists is from His creation. He also says in Al-Furqan, Surah Al-Furqan, verse 25, the second verse, 25:2, He says, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا. He has created everything and has measured it exactly according to its due measurement. And He says in Surah Al-Safat, the 37th Surah, 37-96, He says, وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَكُمْ وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah has created you and what you do. Created you and what you do. Okay? So this is basically a synopsis of what our belief in al-Qadr. We believe in four things. Allah knew it, whatever it is, and He knew it, He recorded it, He willed it, and He created it. Those four things. We believe in all four of those things. We have to believe in all four of those things for our belief in al-Qadr to be what? To be correct. Now there's some important notes because this is one of those topics that causes people, when they don't understand it correctly, to what? To go astray. And it can lead some people to go astray in different ways. One of the ways which people commonly go astray with respect to al-Qadr is that they begin to justify their illicit behavior via what? With Qadr. Anything, sisters, you didn't even need to repeat. Anything. Tafadali. Sure? Don't hesitate. طيب. So because of that propensity to deviate, when we don't understand al-Qadr correctly, there's a few what? Tanbihat, a few notes on al-Qadr that I want to mention before we go and read some of the points in the book. So the first note that I want you to pay attention to, ya ikhwani wa akhawati, is that our belief in divine decree or predestination does not negate the existence of our own free will and our ability to choose and determine our actions and behavior. So we should never think that since Allah has what? Predetermined, preordained what will happen, then we don't have what? We don't have free will. And free will is something which is confirmed. Free will for human beings, something which is confirmed not only by the Quran and the Sunnah, by the texts, but it's also confirmed by what? By logic and common sense. Right? So we look at, first of all, from the textual side. What's the proof from the textual side that we have what? We have free will. We're able to what? To determine our behavior. The proof is a statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which He said, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمَنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. In Surah Al-Kahf. He says, so whoever wills, let him believe. And whoever wills, let him disbelieve. That we are the ones who choose to what? To believe and choose to disbelieve. It's something that we what? Nashat. We what? We will it. We determine for ourselves. Belief or disbelief. So that's from the texts. What about logically speaking? Logically speaking, ya ikhwani wa akhawati, every human being, he recognizes that he has the will and capability to do what he chooses to do. And refrain from doing what he chooses to refrain from. And all of us always differentiate between that which we've done intentionally, what we've done by choice, and that what we have done inadvertently. So for example, let's say one of us has a cup of coffee on his desk, and it's his favorite cup of coffee, and it's perfect. So let's say he likes it really hot. It's what? It's piping hot. When you put your hand over it, you have to move your hand away. It's so hot, the steam, right? He likes it like that. And with the perfect amount of cream, the perfect amount of shade, it's just perfect. Perfect cup. And all he wants to do is what? Drink that coffee. Right? But suddenly something happens. He's like, maybe turn this way, and there's some noise or some disturbance, so he turns around quickly and knocks it over. And he says, oh. He realizes that what? This happened by accident. I didn't mean to spill this coffee, lose this coffee. I wanted to drink this coffee. And he, internally, and through his what? His outward gesture, he knows and we know that what? He didn't do that intentionally, by choice. Well, another scenario, another cup of coffee. Sitting on the desk, I got so busy, it got cold. It got, whatever, and it just tastes awful. So he gets up and goes to the sink and does what? Pours it out. Right? And when he does that, he knows and we know that what? He intended to get rid of that because it was what? It was bitter, it lost its taste, or it was too cold, whatever. So this is something that human beings admit internally, even if they don't admit externally. That they do what? There's a difference between what? What they choose to do and what they do inadvertently. So this is the proof that what? We do have free will. However, our will and ability is governed and superseded by what? By the will of Allah. His permission, His allowing things to happen. And so we cannot do anything unless His universal will permits and allows us. As Allah says in Surah Al-Takwiyah 81:29, He says, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. And you do not will, O people, except that Allah wills. So yeah, we do have free will to choose, but ultimately our choices will not be affected unless what? Unless Allah wills it and allows it to what? To happen. Okay? But that doesn't negate the fact that we have what? Free will. It just means that what? Our free will is not independent of Allah's will. That's the first note. The second note is, since we say that Allah has to will whatever we do, since we say that, someone might venture to say, well, if our actions occur by Allah's will, then we cannot be blamed or punished when we sin. Because Allah has willed our sins. Allah has what? Willed it. He's given us what? The okay. He's given us the green light to what? To sin. So now, is this understanding, is it correct? Person says, hey, we can't be blamed. You can't criticize me for sinning because whatever I do, Allah has what? Given me the green light to do it. Okay? So the answer is, this is what? This is not correct. It's not proper for a Muslim to what? To think like this, or to think that he's free of blame or absolved from punishment, or that our sins and errors are not what? Not something we can be held accountable for or criticized for, because Allah has willed them. And that's for two reasons. You have to look at this from two angles. The first angle is that Allah's will is two what? Two types. There's two types of Allah's will. The first one is the universal will. And that's the will which is tantamount to permitting or allowing. Permitting or allowing. And the second will, legal will, which is tantamount to loving and being pleased with. Loving and being pleased with what happens. So Allah has two types of will. He has the will of allowing and permitting things to happen, and the will of loving and being pleased with what happens. So when we sin, universal will, that's the will of allowing or permitting things to happen. Universal will. The second one is legal will, which is tantamount or synonymous with loving and being pleased with what happens. So now, if you understand this, when people sin, Allah has willed their sin from what? From one angle. But He hasn't willed it from the other angle. So He has willed it in the sense that He what? He allowed it to happen. He permitted it to happen. But He hasn't willed it in the sense that He what? He loves it and is pleased with it. He hasn't willed it from that angle because he doesn't what? He doesn't love it and he isn't pleased with the sin. Right? So you're only partly correct when you say Allah has willed it. You guys understand that? Kind of. Okay, طيب. Person says, hey man, you can't blame me for sinning because Allah has willed it. طيب, Allah willed it in terms of what? Permitting it. But He didn't will it in terms of being pleased with it. He's not okay with it. He's angry about it. So He hasn't willed it. He hasn't what? Totally willed it. You understand that part so far? Perfect. طيب, now, the second part of it is that criticism, censure, and blame, al-Inkar, in this world, and the punishment in the hereafter are linked to which will? Which will are they linked to? Huh? The legal one. The one of His loving and being pleased with. Meaning that a person is only free from blame and absolved of guilt and retribution if his actions have been willed by Allah legally. Right? So he can't say, hey, you can't blame me because my actions were willed by Allah universally. We say, la ya Sheikh, because blame is linked to what? Allah's legal will. So we can blame you if your actions contradict His legal will, even though they're in keeping with His universal will. You guys see that? So for example, let's say, Allah Zakhir Sheikh. Let's say a man prayed. He fasted and he gave charity. And then some people, non-believers or hypocrites, they blamed him, they rebuked him. There would be no harm if he said Allah has willed it. He would be in his right to say, Allah has willed it. I can't be blamed because Allah has willed it. And what he means would be what? He would mean both what? Universal will and the will that matters in this context. The will of what? The will of loving and being pleased with. You can't blame me because Allah loves it and is pleased with it. Make sense? Same thing. If a woman, she covers her head and she shaves the head of her newborn child, and people will, non-believers and hypocrites will what? Will blame them for that. Okay, maybe hypocrites is a strong word. Muslims who don't have a good understanding. Okay? Because you do have that. You have Muslims who, some of these things, they don't like it, they don't approve because they've been affected by the modern world that we live in. And so, oh, why'd you shave your child's head? There'll be a Muslim saying this. They'll blame you. The woman could say what? Qadr Allah. This is what? Allah's will. Meaning what? Not only His universal will, He permitted it, but what? The will that absolves me of blame. Allah loves this and is pleased with it. But if a person sins, they drink wine. They can't say, somebody says, hey, you can't drink wine. Haram alayk. So he says, oh, Allah has willed it. Nah. As if Allah has willed it, so don't what? Don't blame me. Nah, I can blame you because what? He's not pleased with it. This is the will that absolves you of blame and you're not in compliance with it. You guys see that? So a person can't what? They can't use Allah's will as a justification for their sin or to absolve themselves of what? Of blame. But through by that, note number 3, for these two reasons, what we just mentioned, one, we all have free will. And 2, Allah may permit us to sin, but He's not pleased with our sin. For these two reasons, no one can ever cite divine decree to justify his or her sins. Nobody can ever say, I sinned because Allah what? Allah willed it. Allah, as if to say in a roundabout way, Allah made me a sinner. Allah made me what? Sin. And if Allah had willed, I wouldn't have sinned. I wouldn't be sinning unless Allah what? Wrote it like this. So it's as if what? I have no choice in the matter. I'm kind of like forced to what? To follow the path because this is what Allah has what? Decreed. You follow me? So they use al-qadr as a justification for their sins. You got it? Or repeat. Okay, so They use al-qadr as a justification for their sins. So now we can refute this concept, and it's not uncommon, ya ikhwan. It's not uncommon for Muslims to use al-qadr as a justification. I'll give you an example. And they'll use it in different ways. So they might not say, Allah decreed this. But what they'll say, for example, they'll say, let's say you have a woman who doesn't wear hijab. And so she'll say, yeah, I don't wear hijab because Allah has not what? Written it for me. Allah has not written it for me. And I hope one day Allah will write for me that I will wear hijab. So basically she's saying that Allah hasn't decreed it, because if He decreed it, I would do what? I would be wearing it. So since I'm not wearing it, Allah hasn't written it. He hasn't decreed it. Not my fault. He needs to get on his job, basically. You see that? And this is not something I'm making up. I actually heard a woman say this. A woman said this to me. I don't wear hijab, and the reason why I don't wear hijab is because what? Allah hasn't written it for me. Hasn't decreed it. I hope Allah will write it for me. But so how do we answer people who use al-qadr as a justification for what? For their sins. First of all, we can answer them with the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-An'am, verse 148, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا أَشْرَكْنَا وَلَا آبَاؤُنَا وَلَا حَرَّمْنَا مِنْ شَيْءٍ كَذَلِكَ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ حَتَّى ذَاقُوا بَأْسَنَا. Allah says in this verse, He says, those who associate partners with Allah will say, if Allah had willed, we would not have associated partners with Him, nor our fathers before us, and we would not have prohibited anything that He permitted. Likewise did those who came before them tell lies, till they tasted our wrath. So notice, these people who what? These mushrikun who were associating partners with Allah, doing the most heinous crime, and they were prohibiting things which Allah had permitted. They were making haram what Allah had made halal. They justified it with what? Al-qadr. Allah did what? Allah willed it. And if He didn't want it to happen like this, He wouldn't have what? Willed it like that. They use it as a proof. So notice two things in the ayah. Allah called the people who said this and used al-qadr as a justification. He called them what? Liars. He called them what? Liars. He said, just like this, the people before them told lies on Allah. So He's saying, what? This is a lie. Someone tries to use al-qadr, he's what? He's lying. Then He says what? حَتَّى ذَاقُوا بَأْسَنَا. Until we punish them, until they tasted our wrath. So if it were acceptable to use al-qadr as a proof for our actions, would Allah have punished them? So the fact that Allah punished them lets you know that what we can't use al-qadr as what? As a hujjah. طيب, the second response we give to the people who use qadr as a proof for their action is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which He says, رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. It says messengers sent as warners and givers of glad tidings, so that man would have no argument against Allah after the sending of the messengers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically saying here that when do people have an argument with Allah for their sins? When can they say, oh Allah, I sinned and I can't be blamed for my sin? That's when what? When they sin and they don't know, because no messenger came to them. The information didn't reach them. But once the information reaches them and they what? Are cognizant of right and wrong, they understand that this is right and this is wrong, then they have no what? They have no plea, they have no argument against Allah. So Allah says they have no argument once the messengers come. No argument includes the argument of al-qadr. The argument of al-qadr. That's also what? Excluded. You can't use qadr as an argument once the what? Once the proof of right and wrong, or the knowledge of right and wrong, has come to you. But number 3. The third thing that we use to what? Refute the people who use al-qadr as a hujjah, is that the Prophet ﷺ prohibited the Muslims from relying on divine decree and ordered them to act and to strive to do the deeds that would bring about the desired result. So basically the Prophet himself told the Muslims, look, don't rely on what Allah has decreed, but what? Strive. Work. Don't sit back and say, it is what it is. I don't pray because Allah hasn't decreed it. I don't wear hijab because Allah hasn't decreed it. I'm just waiting for the decree of Allah to take place. La, the Prophet said what? Work, strive, and do the deeds that will bring about the desired result. In the hadith of Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا وَقَدْ كُتِبَ مَقْعَدُهُ مِنَ النَّارِ وَمَقْعَدُهُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ. He said, there's not a single one of you, except that his place in hellfire and his place in paradise has already been written for him. It's already been written. It's already been determined. So naturally, the Sahaba, they said what? Oh Rasulullah, shall we not just then rely on what has been written? Since it's already been predetermined, why bother? Why, should we not just rely on what has been written, right? Shall we not just rely on that and not do anything? Because at the end of the day, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Or whatever's been decreed is going to come to pass. So the Prophet said, La. He said, no, strive. For every person will be facilitated toward that for which he has been created. He said what? Do the deeds, and the path toward which you've been created will be what? Facilitated for you. But you can't just sit back and do nothing and say, I'm relying on Allah's decree. So that's number 3. Number 4. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't place a burden on a soul greater than what it can bear. We all agree on this, right? Allah doesn't ask the Muslims or ask any human being to do the impossible. We all agree with that, right? Allah doesn't ask the Muslims or ask any human being to do anything which is what? Impossible. So now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to do good deeds. Is that not so? To avoid the evil deeds and to avoid that which will lead to His punishment. He's ordered us to do this, required us to do this. Is that not so? Now, if He requires us to do these things, and then He compels us to sin and do the opposite, and we're unable to what? To do the good deeds and resist, refrain from doing the sins, then Allah would in effect be asking us to do that which we cannot what? Cannot do. That which is impossible. And that's what? Batil. That's falsehood. Because Allah does not what? Does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear or require us to do that which we're incapable of doing. So we know for certain that Allah hasn't what? Made us do evil and then ordered us to what? To do good and threatened us to punish us if we do evil. Right, so that's another proof. The 5th one is that I want to ask you honestly, ya akhwani wa akhawat. Does any one of us know what Allah has decreed for us? Does any one of us know? Does any one of us know whether or not we're going to be in heaven or hell? Whether or not we're going to pray Qiyam al-Layl tonight or not? We don't know these things until they happen. So when a person says, oh, I'm not going to pray tonight because Allah hasn't decreed it. I'm going to go to the bar because Allah has decreed it. Right? I'm going to be in hell. Allah has decreed it. So why work? Right now, they're justifying their actions with something that they have no knowledge of. Is that correct? Is it correct to justify your actions based upon something you have no knowledge of? It's not correct. It doesn't make sense. But on the other side of the coin, we know that going to the bar is haram. And it's something that Allah may what? Punish a person for. And praying Qiyam al-Layl, praying at night, is something which what? Allah is pleased with. This path leads to hell. This path leads to Jannah. These are things we what? We know. So why it's not proper for a person to abandon acting in accordance with what they know. Acting in accordance with what they know, they abandon that. And then they do what? They act in accordance with what they don't know. They're guessing. That doesn't make sense. Right? The person says, oh, I'm like this because Allah is. You don't even know. You don't know that. But you do know that Allah what? Loves this and is pleased with this. So what? Act in accordance with what you know. This is what Allah expects. Not act in accordance with what you don't know. That's number 5. Number 6, is that this principle that they use, oh, I don't do this or I'm not going to do that because Allah hasn't willed it, from the good things or the things which will be beneficial in the hereafter. This practice, they don't apply that same rule when it comes to what? The things which will benefit them in this world. So for example, a person will say, hey, come on, we're going to go to the masjid and pray. We're going to go to the masjid and pray and get more reward for praying in congregation. Person says, no, I'm not going to go because, Allah just hasn't willed for me to be, one of the people who go to the mosque and pray. Allah hasn't willed that. But this is something good and something beneficial in the what? Hereafter. So he says, I'm not going to go and try to do this thing which will get me more reward because Allah hasn't willed it. I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not cut out to be that person. But then, let's say, on the other side of the coin, someone says, hey, let's go and apply for this promotion at work. Let's go apply for this promotion. You might get it, you might not get it, but we can just what? Apply. The person won't say what? No, I'm not going to get it, so I won't apply. He says what? There's no skin off my nose, right? I'm going to what? Apply and see what happens. So when it comes to the dunya, let's say, for example, Best Buy is giving, some kind of discount, 50% off for the first 100 people, right? So now when people hear about that, there's going to be a huge crowd. It might be 1,000, 2,000 people out there, and they'll get out there so early. But the person will still do what? They'll still go. Maybe I'll be number 99. Maybe I'll be 100. They'll go. Even though, you know how it is. People, it's unlikely that you're going to be in that first 100. But people will do what? They'll go. They'll take their chances if there's something beneficial in this dunya. But when it's something beneficial in the hereafter, then it's like, oh, I'm not going to get it anyway. No. If you really believe that al-qadr justifies what? Resting on your laurels and not doing good, then you should apply that to what? Both a dunya, what? Wal akhirah. Not just one or the other. If you really believe that. The last one, number 7, is that if these people who say, hey, this thing happened by qadr. Don't blame me, blame Allah because He willed it. These people who have this mentality, they don't apply that if somebody transgresses against what? Against them. When they transgress against Allah, it's like, oh, qadarallahu ma sha'a fa'al. Right? This is Allah's decree, He willed it. But if somebody were to transgress against them, somebody takes their money, somebody beats them, somebody keys up their car, and they find out who it is, and that person were to say, hey, Allah willed it. They would say, the hell you say? No, you did this. These are your deeds, and you're going to have to, you're going to have to pay the price for this. There's going to be a penalty for this. There's going to be consequences for this. Don't they? They don't say, well, yeah, you're right. Allah willed it. No. So if it's right for you, when you transgress against Allah, to use al-qadr as a justification, it should be right for others when they transgress against you, to use al-qadr as a justification. If it's not, then it's what? It's not. We can't be what? The people who have double standards. Make sense? So that's what we have to say, some notes about al-qadr, ya ikhwan. And so now we'll just read and make a few comments on the concept of the book, and then we'll stop for prayer. So the compilers, on page 66, they say Allah had decreed all matters long before their existence. He knows exactly when and where everything will take place, and everything occurs according to His decree. And then he mentioned an ayah, no calamity on the earth or in yourselves, but it is inscribed in the book of decrees, befalls before we bring it into existence. Surely that is easy for Allah. First of all, Allah created the pen and then commanded to write. The pen said, what should I write? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied, write out all that is destined to happen until the day of judgment. Therefore, whatever has been ordained for man cannot be changed, and whatever does not occur has not been decreed for him. And here, ya ikhwan, a person would say, well, what do we do? It says here, whatever has been ordained for man cannot be changed, and whatever does not occur has not been decreed for him. But what do we do then with some of those ayat and some of those hadith, which give us the indication that what? That the decree can change. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ra'd, 13th surah, the 39th verse, 1339. He says, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ. Allah deletes whatever He wills and what? And affirms whatever He wills. Ibn Abbas, he said, commenting on this verse, he said, Allah deletes whatever He wills and confirms whatever He wills in the book. Except al-rizq, except provisions, and al-ajal, and lifespan, was-sa'ada was-shaqawa, whether a person will be happy or miserable in the hereafter. And then he says, okay, then Umar and Ibn Mas'ud, they said about this ayah, Umar and Ibn Mas'ud, they commented on this ayah and they said, Allah will do what? He'll wipe even as-sa'ada wa-shaqawa. He'll even delete whether a person will be happy or sad. And He'll also wipe off, delete or change, alter His rizq, His provisions, and His lifespan. And yuthbit ma yasha. And in place of it, He'll put whatever He wants, whatever He wills. He'll put whatever He wants, whatever He wills. What is that? What are they talking about? They're saying that Allah writes and records and decrees. Lakin yamhu. He deletes it. Wa yuthbit. And what? And affirms. And Umar ibn Abbas is saying what? Allah could do what? Take a person's lifespan and do what? Alter it. He could delete what He's written and what? Change it. What He's given for provisions, delete it and then what? Change it. Shaqawa, sa'ada, He could do what? Delete it and what? Change it. And this is what? Supported by a number of what? Texts. Tafadali. Shaqawa, it means misery, being miserable. And sa'ada means happiness, being happy. And this is supported by a number of texts. So for example, shuf, we have the hadith collected by Ahmed and Nasa'i and Ibn Majah on the authority of Thoban, in which the Prophet said, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَحْرُمُ الرِّزْقِ بِالذَّنْبِ يُصِيبُهُ ولا يرد القدر إلا الدعاء ولا يزيد في العمر إلا البر. Sure, the Prophet said, he said, indeed a man will be prohibited. He'll be prohibited or withheld some provisions because of a sin that he commits. So some provisions, some rizq will be what? Withheld from him because of some sin he commits. وَلَا يَرُدُّ الْقَدَرِ. And nothing will do what? Nothing will push away and prevent the occurrence of something decreed except a dua. So when the Prophet said nothing will push away al-qadr and prevent it from occurring except dua, it means what? Dua could do what? Could what? Change the qadr, right? Then he says, وَلَا يَزِيدُ فِي الْعُمْرِ إِلَّا الْبِرِّ. And nothing will increase a person's lifespan except what? Righteousness. So that means righteousness could do what? Could change a person's lifespan. We also have the hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Anas, in which the Prophet said, he said, in the hadith, he said, مَنْ سَرَّهُ أَنْ يُبْسَطْ لَهُ فِي رِزْقِهِ أَوْ يُنْسَأْ لَهُ فِي أَثَرِ فَلْيَسِلْ رَحِمَهُ. He said, whoever likes that his rizq, his provisions will be what? Made abundant. And his lifespan will be extended. Then let him join the ties of kinship. So the Prophet tells us here that a person could do what? Extend his lifespan. It could do what? Increase his what? His provisions by what? Join the ties of kinship. We also have the hadith mentioned by Ibn Kathir in his tafsir, when he talked about that ayah that we mentioned previously. He said, the Prophet said, إِنَّ الدُّعَاء وَالْقَضَى لَيَتَعَالَجَانِ بَيْنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. He said that what happens is that a dua is going up, isn't it? We're making dua and it's ascending to Allah. And the qadr of Allah is what? Is descending. And he says they do what? They get into a little bit of a tussle in what? In the sama. They tussle with each other in what? In the sama. Al-Muhim, the point I'm trying to make is that what the compiler said has to be kind of amended a little bit, because what? There are certain things that we could do in terms of our good deeds and in terms of dua that could affect what? Al-Qadr. So then a person says, well, aren't we taught, don't we believe that Lawh al-Mahfuz, this preserved tablet, is what? It can't be changed. And we say what? Yes, it can't be changed. So then what's the meaning of what? Yamhu Allah wa yuthbit. Allah deletes and what? Affirms. He can what? Change. Well, we say there's two types of what? There's two tablets. The first tablet is what? The preserved tablet, which what? This is what? Is decreed, what has been written, and is what's going to take place. But the second tablet, or the second writing, is the writing of who? The writing of who? The angels. And that scroll, that tablet that the angels write, can what? Can be changed. And that's the one that Allah what? Yamhu wa yuthbit. Right? He what? He can delete some of it and what? Change some, make alterations in that particular one. But that just means that what? The decree can be what? Influenced by what? Our good deeds and influenced by our dua. The thing about that is the compilers, they say, Allah is aware of all. Okay, let's go to the benefits. On page 69, it says, believing in the divine decree yields a number of benefits. This includes the fact that the believer feels content when he realizes that when a calamity strikes, it only does so by Allah's leave. مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. No calamity befalls but by the leave of Allah. He also knows that such a calamity is a means of having his sins blotted out, as the Prophet has said. So one of the benefits of al-Qadr is that when we believe in it, we always realize, or we always have what? Contentment when what? When a calamity strikes. And we're not the people who what? They become distraught, and basically they become basically guided by their emotions. Their emotions take over, and they begin to behave what? An emotional state, because they lose their senses and become a slave to their emotions, basically. That you're content because you know what? This is Allah's decree. So something happens, you don't like it, and you're able to what? Maintain your composure. Because what? Because you understand that this is what Allah's decree. You have a certain level of contentment. Also, if we go down to 70, the bottom of 70, he also knows that if the whole world were to join forces to benefit someone with something, they would not cause any benefit except as Allah decreed. And were they to join forces to harm someone, they would not be able to except as Allah decreed. So what this does is that it will create a level of contentment and satisfaction with what? With whatever takes place. So the first one, Qadr will cause you to maintain your composure. Second one, you'll be content and satisfied with whatever happens, knowing that no matter what, who, where had come together to make this happen, it wouldn't happen except by Allah's decree. So a person goes for a position, a job, and he does everything right. He scores excellent on the interview, and his credentials are impeccable, and he has the experience, and etc. And somebody else has what we call wasata. They have basically someone on the inside who is able to what? To convince them to give, even though he doesn't have the credentials, doesn't have the experience. That person won't go away. He's saying, "Oh, it's not fair. It's not, this is not right," and being what? Having discontent. No, it doesn't matter what I did. This is what Allah had what? Decreed, and he's what? He's able to be content and satisfied. Not necessarily pleased with what was done, the wrong thing that was done, but what? Content and satisfied with Allah's decree, with the ultimate result. So basically that's two of the fruits of believing in al-Qadr. Any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, ya ikhwan? Fi shay. Going once? going twice. تفضل إبراهيم.
I just want to know the hadith. You said one of the hadith about lengthening your lifespan.
Okay.
What's the first one you said?
So the first one,
Yeah, you said two. The second one was reaching your kinship. The first one.
yeah, the second one was the one by Muslim on the authority of Anas. Actually, it's Bukhari Muslim, authority of Anas. And that's the one about whoever wants to extend his lifespan and the one who wants to increase his provisions. That was by Anas. The first one was collected by Ahmed and Nasai and Majah on authority of Thoban. إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَا يَحْرُمُ الرِّزْقَ بِالذَّنْبِ يُصِيبُهُ. And the person will be prohibited some provisions because of a sin he committed. وَلَا يَرُدُّ الْقَدْرَ إِلَّا الدُّعَاء. Nothing will repel decree except supplication. وَلَا يَزِيدُ فِي الْعُمْرِ إِلَّا الْبِرِّ. And nothing will increase a person's lifespan except righteousness. Any questions? Any other questions?
Going 3.